So this morning we're going to be talking about cultural myths and fairy tales. And we all know there are myths, cultural myths, and they shape who we are. These myths come and go as society changes and evolves. For example, I'm pretty sure that children should be seen and not heard is on its way out. And good thing. Other stories that are fading fast in our times include there are only two genders. We are a post-racial society. Sadly not true. And this planet has limitless resources. Right? What are some of the others that you see that you're concerned about? Boys will be boys. That one's on its way out. What? The man is the head of the house. Not in this house. Excuse me?
Better the devil you know.
Better the devil you know. Yeah. Oh boy, there are a whole host of them. These myths instill expectations in us. They inform our understanding of who we should be and what we should do. They invite us to believe that if we do the right things in a particular way, in the correct order, we can predict the outcome. Only life doesn't actually work like that. So the insidious thing that happens is that we internalize the unexpected twists and turns as our own failures, rather than questioning whether these myths are true and deserve to be guiding our lives. But one of the things we get to do as humans is we get to choose which stories we're going to hold close and which stories we're ready to lay down. We get to decide what we're going to teach our children. We can't give that power away and let Mother Culture decide, because right now our world is still caught in the grip of myths that are particularly hazardous to our health. So today we'll reflect together on what it means for a story to be true. We'll debunk a few of those toxic myths that are so very dangerous, and hopefully we'll leave able to be just a little bit more intentional about the myths and stories and fairy tales we choose to tell. So come, let us worship together. Our first reading this morning actually comes from the website called Truth Dig. Our society should have collapsed by now. You know that, right? Why hasn't it? Well, it comes down to the myths we've been sold. Myths that are ingrained in our social programming from birth, deeply entrenched like an impacted wisdom tooth. I'm going to cover 8 of them.
Myth number 8, we have a democracy. If you think we still have a democracy or a democratic republic, ask yourself this. When was the last time Congress did something that the people of America supported that did not align with corporate interests?
Myth number 7, we have an accountable and legitimate voting system. Gerrymandering, voter purging, data mining, broken exit polling, push polling, superdelegates, electoral votes, black box machines, voter ID suppression, provisional ballots, super PACs, dark monies, third parties banished from the debates, and 2 corporate parties. We have what a large Harvard study called the worst election system in the Western world.
Myth number 6, we have an independent media that keeps the rulers accountable. Our fake news, our media outlets are funded by weapons contractors, big pharma, big banks, big oil, and other big businesses. The corporate media's jobs are to rally for war, cheer for Wall Street, and froth at the mouth for consumerism. It's their mission to actually fortify belief in the myths I'm telling you about right now.
Myth number 5, we have an independent judiciary. The criminal justice system has become a weapon wielded by the corporate state. This is how bankers can foreclose on millions of homes illegally and see no jail time, but activists often serve jail time for nonviolent civil disobedience.
Myth number 4, the police are here to protect you. They're your friends. The police in our country are primarily designed to do 2 things: protect the property of the rich and perpetuate the completely immoral drug war on drugs. We lock up more people than any other country on earth, meaning the land of the free is the largest prison state in the world.
Myth number 3, buying will make you happy. The dark truth is that we have to believe the myth that consuming is the answer, or else we won't keep running around on the wheel. And if we aren't running around on the wheel, then we start thinking, we start asking questions. Those questions are not good for the ruling elite, who enjoy a society based on the daily exploitation of 99% of us.
Myth number 2, if you work hard, things will get better. According to Deloitte's Shift Index survey, quote, 80% of people are dissatisfied with their jobs, quote, unquote. The average person spends 90,000 hours at work over their lifetime, quote. That's about 1/7 of your life, and most of it is during your most productive years. Technological advances can do most everything that truly must get done. Scientists say it's quite possible artificial intelligence will take away all human jobs in 120 years. We're all working to make other people rich because we have a society in which we have to work.
And this leads me to the largest myth of our American society. Myth number 1, you are free. And I'm not talking about the millions locked up in our prisons. I'm talking about you and me. I understand there are certain restrictions on freedom we actually desire to have in our society, but a lot of our lack of freedom is not something you would vote for if given a chance. Try building a fire in the parking lot to keep warm in the winter. Try sleeping in your car for more than a few hours without being harassed. Try maintaining your privacy for a week without a single email, web search, or location data set collected by the NSA and the telecoms. Try signing up for the military because you need college money, and then one day just walking off base going, yeah, I was bored, thought I would just not do this anymore. We are less free than a dog on a leash. We live in one of the hardest working, most unequal societies on the planet with more billionaires than ever. Point is, in order to enforce this illogical, immoral system, the corrupt rulers most of the time don't need guns and tear gas to keep the exploitation mechanisms humming along. All they need are some good, solid myths for us all to buy into, hook, line, and sinker. Some fairy tales for adults. And that's the end of that reading, which I should have started with a content warning. It's pretty out there. But that point at the end, that these myths are being used to keep us from being who we're meant to be. And whether you agree with his articulation of these particular myths or not, I think it's worth thinking about the ways that myths keep us back, hold us back, keep us down, trap us. And then here's this by Robert Bly. Things to think. Think in ways you've never thought before. If the phone rings, think of it as carrying a message larger than anything you've ever heard, vaster than 100 lines of Yeats. Think that someone may bring a bear to your door, may be wounded and deranged, or think that a moose has risen out of the lake and he's carrying on his antlers a child of your own whom you've never seen. When someone knocks on the door, think that he's about to give you something large, tell you you're forgiven, or that it's not necessary to work all the time, or that it's been decided that if you lie down, no one will die. The myths that I would name as the ones that are killing us are consumerism, hierarchy, and rugged individualism. I think these myths are killing our planet, destroying our society, and eroding our capacity to find meaning and experience joy. They're not the only toxic myths out there, but for me, they're the three biggest. I don't need to spend a lot of time making the case that they exist, do I?
What's hierarchy?
Yeah.
I'm gonna get there. Okay. So, all right, I can skip forward. Essentially, hierarchy is an overarching term for all forms of oppression. So racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, any system that puts one person over another or advantages one category of people over another. Okay. So they exist, right?
How is it spelled?
Kyriarchy. Hierarchy. You know, I flunked out of the spelling bee on like my second word every time I did it. So what I want to do this morning, I don't want to focus on proving that they exist or that they're damaging. I mean, that's just a downer. I'd rather focus on exploring the realities that we can lean into that counteract or maybe even shatter these toxic myths. I want to spend time imagining the news stories that can pull us forward. So let's start with consumerism. This is a particularly pervasive and invasive myth. It has tendrils in almost every aspect of our society and in our psyches. It includes the story that bigger is better, that unfettered growth is both possible and desirable, and as if that weren't bad enough, consumerism trains us to believe that the path to happiness lies in getting more stuff. It convinces us that the road to fulfillment is career advancement. And when we're trapped by this myth, our entire sense of worth, our value as a human being, rests on our ability to make and to spend money. The reality is that we're rapidly depleting the resources available to us on this planet. There truly is no place else to go. And I'm not talking just about fossil fuels, but things like clean water and fertile ground and breathable air. If we don't debunk this myth and radically change how we live, we're going to render much of our precious blue boat home uninhabitable for our species and many others. We are running out of time to turn this ship around. That's why a global climate strike has been scheduled for this Friday, September 20th, to coincide with United Nations meeting on climate in New York City. I recently began following Greta Thunberg on Facebook. Greta, if you haven't heard of her, is this amazing young activist who traveled here to the US from Sweden, and she traveled on a sailboat because she didn't want to fly because of the carbon impact. And she started striking all by herself a year ago. I think she's like 11, 12, something like that? 16. Okay, so she's 16.
She was 14 when she started striking.
14 when she started striking. Okay, so she's 14 years old. All by herself at the age of 14, standing outside the Swedish parliament with a sign saying "School Strike for Climate" every Friday, every week. She's written a book, spoken to the United Nations, been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Makes the rest of us look like underachievers. She's my new hero. Now, the Unitarian Universalist Association has endorsed the strike. Locally, Moscow High School students are organizing an event in East City Park at 11:25 on Friday. I'm going to be there, and heads up, Joe, I'm going to ask the board at the meeting tomorrow to officially give all employees the day off to participate and support in the strike. Probably should have told you that earlier. It's been a busy time. Yeah. My colleagues Peggy Clark and Karen Johnson offer the following additional options. If you're not currently in a situation where walking out makes sense, you can still register your intention to strike, make yourself visible through social media, refuse to engage in actions that are leading to our shared destruction, consumerism, or unnecessary travel, join people in your community who are gathering in protest in your area, and we've heard the clear message, the youth are leading, but they need us to show up in support of them. You can also spend the day tending a garden, reading up on alternative economic systems, or otherwise helping to move us all toward a more sustainable future. End of quote. In attempting to extract the capitalist myth from our worldview and our psyches, we might ask ourselves, what if environmental sustainability turns out to be more fulfilling and pleasant? So many of the developments make life better. Walking or biking doesn't just reduce carbon footprint, it gives us fresh air and exercise, opportunities to connect with nature and with neighbors. Eating fresh local produce tastes better. It's better for our bodies. My reusable water bottle works better. I like it better because it keeps my water colder and I can put ice cubes in it. More than that, when we live our values, when we spend our money and put our resources toward building the world that we're dreaming of, it feels right. It feels whole. It feels like this is what we're meant to do as humans. Here's a dream worth leaning into from Wendell Berry. If we'll have the wisdom to survive and stand like slow-growing trees on a ruined place, renewing, enriching it, if we will make our seasons welcome here, asking not too much of earth or of heaven, then a long time after we are dead, our lives prepare will live there, their houses strongly placed upon the valley sides, fields and gardens rich in the windows. The river will run clear as we will never know it, and over it, birdsong like a canopy. I know you know this poem and its conclusion. This is no paradisal dream. Its hardship is its possibility. This is a story that gets us somewhere. It's a story that can save us. That means it is true and it is real, whether or not it is realistic. And that's an important distinction. Let's move on to our second deadly myth, kyriarchy. This is the overarching term for all forms of oppression, racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, etc. Basically, we need to dismantle any belief system that assigns one category of people more worth than the other, and any kind of societal structure that leads to discrimination and injustice. I think what will help us in this work is to focus on the why. One of the pillars of our faith is that all people have inherent worth and dignity. It's not earned, it's not assigned, it is inherent. It is our birthright. But saying those words and living them are not always the same thing. One of the things that makes kyriarchy so evil is that it keeps people from feeling their own sense of worth. It deprives us of our dignity. It makes our lives smaller. There's a huge opportunity cost, a tremendous amount of life energy wasted on both perpetuating and healing from acts of dehumanization. 2 years ago, the Committee for Anti-Racism, Anti-Oppression, and Multiculturalism of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association published a book called Centering: Navigating Race, Authenticity, and Power in Ministry. With essays and responses written by about 20 prominent ministers of color in our movement, it provides many years' worth of food for thought. One of my takeaways from the book was that my colleagues of color have to work harder, much harder, to be their full, and they aren't able to bring their full authentic selves to this work. Their ministries, and in fact their very beings, were hampered, overlooked, warped, often curtailed by the institutional resistance they encountered. Here are a few excerpts from an essay by the Reverend Dr. Kristen Harper that particularly broke my heart. She writes, "I grew up alongside a white New England culture that I learned to negotiate but that would never fully accept me. In the church I now serve, I consistently lift up the message that you can bring all of yourself to the table, and yet it's been clear for most of my life and my ministry that my Black self is at best tolerated. Mostly I feel diminished. I experience a lot of what I would call questions of competency. I feel completely ignored. Keeping in the suffering you experience from daily acts of racism is not healthy. I have stuffed so much that at times I feel I am going to burst. So you think about what the world could be. Just think about what the world could be if all of us were free to bring our full, authentic self to the table all the time. If all of us were empowered instead of restrained by these structures, that's the goal. The myths of kyriarchy make one person feel better, but always at the expense of making another person less than they could be, less than they're meant to be. It's 1,000 tiny cuts, and we all know what those cuts feel like. We know what it feels like to get one, to have someone judge us or criticize, cut us down to size, or put us in our place. And we also know what it feels like to give one, to make a cut. These toxic stories are the air we breathe and the water we swim in. We can't escape the damage they do to our hearts. Unintentionally and sometimes intentionally, we cause harm to one another. And every time we do, every time we make another person's spirit bleed, because we're compassionate, because we're humans, because that's how it works, our spirit bleeds too. Because we know this myth is not true. We know this is not right. So imagine it with me, a world where every child grows up safe and loved, secure in their sense of worth, dignity fully intact. A world where every person is nurtured and supported in discerning their own path of becoming, where every last one of us, no exceptions, blooms into the fullness of our capacity and our calling, able to use our birthright gifts to bless this world. Imagine a time when all these brilliant and beautiful, fully realized humans are interdependent, connected, woven together in deep and meaningful ways. Now, to get there, we have to dissolve that third toxic myth, rugged individualism. In a TED Talk called "The Lies Our Culture Tells Us About What Matters and a Better Way to Live," David Brooks asserts that in addition to the climate crisis and the political crisis we find ourselves in, we're also experiencing a social and relational crisis. He lifts up some statistics that 35% of people over the age of 40 are lonely, that only 8% have a deep connection with their neighbor, that sort of thing. But he also makes a bold assertion. Freedom, he says, sucks. Freedom sucks. The myth that he sees as most toxic is that of self-sufficiency. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, most of us are fans of freedom. In America, this is the land of the free. But it turns out that, like most things, any good quality taken to an extreme becomes dangerous. Freedom to be real and healthy requires a corrective, and that corrective is relationship. Freedom requires a corrective, and that corrective is relationship. This is what all of the spiritual traditions of the world teach. The pagans say, "and it harm none." The golden rule doesn't say, "do whatever you want." Then there's the great law of the Iroquois, which reminds us that we aren't just in relationship with other people in the present, but with those still to come 7 generations into the future, and with our ancestors stretching 7 generations back. We're not meant to live the way we're living now. So many of us isolated and alone, plugged into our devices, pouring our lives into our job, keeping our hearts guarded against negativity or loss or pain. We are wired to be in relationship. And not just surface head level connection and conversation, but heart level soul level. We long to be seen and accepted and understood and loved and held in that interdependent web of all life, past, present, and future. Have you felt it? Have you had moments? Bring to mind a moment of that heart-to-heart connection, a time when you felt seen and held, maybe even a part of all that is, by another person or by that interdependent web. Can you all think of a time? Can you think of a moment? It felt right, didn't it? It felt like, yes, this is what it means to be human. How many of you feel like you have enough of those moments in your life? Oh, beloveds. Beloveds. Here we are, bumbling along in our broken world with our broken hearts, trapped in myths that tell us we need to do more, make more, buy more, be more, when the truth is that what we need is right in front of us, needing us just as much. We do have the power to identify the stories that are harming us. We can release them, we can prepare the ground, and then we can choose these new stories, hopeful stories, true stories, stories that are like seeds of hope and resiliency. We can plant them mindfully in our hearts and in our spirits. I'm going to lead you through a little meditation that offers up a few good stories, but you know, and I know, that there are plenty out there. Find the ones you need. And if you don't find it, make something up. We can't trust Mother Culture, that's for sure, but we can trust our own deep knowing. We can trust our own wisdom. So I'd invite you to close your eyes. Follow your breath. And gently bring your attention to those places that have been blighted by poisonous myths. Maybe you want to be free of the myths I've named today, or maybe there are others that feel more threatening. But find those places in yourself and offer them compassion. We need to start by acknowledging the grief, the shame, the loss, the fear. Now, try an explosive exhale. Go like this. Breathe out all of the pain and damage. Do it again. And again. You can do this whenever you need to. Whenever it starts getting to you, just... And now, will you turn to a neighbor? Maybe look them in the eye. Maybe with consent, hold hands. Maybe put your hand on your own heart. Again, with consent, maybe on their heart. Deep breath. We can live sustainably, and we will all have enough. Change is inevitable, but it doesn't need to cost our humanity. Everything we truly need, the earth will provide. Can you say that? Everything we truly need, the earth will provide. Breathe again. Every person is worthy and good and holy. We can break apart the structures that trap us in the illusion of separateness. All of us need all of us to survive. Say that with me. All of us need all of us to survive. One last breath. Love is waiting for you in this community and in this world. The phone rings. Every time the phone rings, it's somebody calling to say they love you or to forgive you, to give you a gift. Love is waiting for you in this community and in the world. Our need for one another isn't a weakness, it is our greatest source of strength. You are enough. We are enough. Say that with me. You are enough. We are enough. So be it, and blessed be.